don't know about you, but I've been really struggling to fall asleep lately.
Oh, I feel you. And that is why I'm so excited for our new sponsor. Meet Hatch Restore. Hatch Restore combines a sound machine, sunrise alarm, smart light, meditations, and an alarm clock all into one easy-to-use device.
Yes, get the sleep you've been dreaming about. Relax with its soft glow reading light without the eye-straining blue hues. Fall asleep fast with sleep stories and meditations that prepare your brain and body for sleep. Gently wake to a custom sunrise alarm that supports healthy cortisol levels. Easy touch control, dimmable digital clock, volume and brightness buttons, and more.
Yes, visit hatch.co to learn more and use code TMH10 to get $10 off Restore today. That's $10 off a Hatch Restore at hatch.co when you use our code TMH10. Greetings, boys and babes. It's the Magic Hour, a place where we navigate through life's peaks and valleys with all the vulnerability and shamelessness we can muster. With the help of world-class guests from all walks of life, we uncover new truths and valuable tools for manifesting our highest potential. I'm your host, Mercedes Terrell, along with my partner in shine, Jade Bryce.
Hi, you guys. I recently participated in Unify's global meditation event, and it was a 12-hour event during quarantine, so we all tuned in through Facebook Live. I turned it on when it first began, thinking I'd just pop in and out, but I was immediately hooked. Each speaker gave so much hope in the middle of so much panic and fear, and we have booked a few of them for the show. Today, we are having on one of the doctors that just blew me away. She is not only my articulation goals, but she speaks so much truth that you feel like you are at a higher frequency by just hearing it.
Yes, and although she's a medical doctor, a lot of what she's going to talk about today will not sound exactly doctor-like, but it is so fundamental in understanding where our culture is at today. So please stay open to it.
Yes. Our guest today has been in medical practice for 16 years and is the founder and medical director of Clear Center of Health, an interdisciplinary integrative medical clinic in Mill Valley, California. Throughout her career, she's become a nationally recognized expert, speaker, and community educator, and has been featured in Vogue magazine and many documentaries on integrative medicine. She has organized educational symposia on integrative medicine for the allopathic community, planned interdisciplinary health science curricula on integrative medicine, and helped start a university department that coordinated research, clinical services, and education in spirituality, cross-cultural medicine, and integrative medicine. For these and other efforts, she was honored by the American Holistic Medical Association.
Yes, she combines her Western allopathic internal medicine training with functional, orthomolecular, and European biological medicine. Over the last 5 years, her diagnostic skills and intuition have been enhanced by completing a master's certificate program at the Academy of Intuition. That's the Academy of Intuition Medicine. She became one of the first doctors in the U.S. to practice Bioresonance Analysis of Health, that's BAH, an advanced evaluation system that utilizes quantum principles to analyze all aspects of a patient's health and develop a highly specific and personalized program of treatment. She is also one of a few U.S. practitioners of ACMOS, a quantum-based energy balancing treatment. These energetic technologies have revolutionized her practice and have allowed her to unravel the most complex of medical cases. If you're not intrigued by now, you must not be paying attention to this introduction. We are so excited to welcome Dr. Beth McDougall to the Magic Hour.
Yay!
Hi.
Hi.
What timing?
Something you said during Unify's event really stuck with me. It was that we must never underestimate the power of a pattern interrupt. And I felt that so deeply. And you also asked, could it be that COVID-19 is emerging as a deep expression of the unified field in response to all of the dissonant systems and short-sighted thinking? So both of those, I remember like for days after, it just kept going in my head. So thank you so much for that. And so we want to talk about that with you. But before, we wanted to get a little bit of your own history and what brought you to being the incredible light that you are today in the medical industry.
Well, I've been practicing for 22 years, and before I even went to medical school, I was interested in medicine of indigenous cultures, and right at that time in the late 80s, psychoneuroimmunology was starting to be researched, and so that was looking at the connection between, our minds and our bodies. And I was really interested at that time in energy medicine and the energetic field of a human being and the chakras and all of that, and started meditating at a really young age. And so I went through medical school, did a residency in internal medicine, and I knew from the very beginning that I was never going to have an actual standard medical practice. I knew I would always do an integrative practice. And at the time that I started, I was more interested in kind of nutritional biochemistry and looking at how I could affect changes in the body by using things that are native to the body, like amino acids and vitamins and minerals and essential fatty acids. And then I got really into bioidentical hormone balancing and was working and became kind of a specialist in that. And natural neurotransmitter balancing, working with amino acids and B vitamins and cofactors to kind of augment or shift the neurotransmitter levels in the brain. And then I ended up with a health crisis personally. Back in 2004, I developed Lyme disease. And it was a kind of like a needle across the record, like abrupt change in my life, because, I had this thriving medical practice, a young daughter and husband, and we were just buying a new house, moving within Mill Valley. And then all of a sudden one day, it felt like I'd had a stroke. And went to the hospital, had a multi-million-dollar, that's what it felt like, multi-$1,000 workup. And I left without answers and was able to figure it out on my own through doing my own blood work that, it was Lyme disease. And I was urged by my colleagues to do a massive kind of like antibiotic protocol to treat it, because it already seemed to be in my nervous system. And I tried that just briefly. I don't even know if I could complete 3 weeks. And I just was like, you know what? This doesn't feel right. I don't like this chemical warfare paradigm. It doesn't speak to me. And so I just forged my own path through that. And, looking at, of course, on a physical level, like, what can I take from the standpoint of herbs and oxidative treatments and nutrients and homeopathy and things like that. But really the vast majority of the work I did that helped me get over it was working on a psychospiritual level. Wow. And doing a lot of energy work on myself and working with different healers and delving deeply into a meditation practice. And so a lot of what I do today is what I learned in my healing of myself and my own health journey. And this is what I'm doing now with patients, is trying to create a set of circumstances for people, almost like a vessel of sorts, so that they can tune in on a deep level to their energetic terrain and get a stronger sense about where dissonance is in their system.
Yeah. Do you think that what brings to mind for me, all of that brings to mind for me, is this idea that I think a lot of us has, that the thing that's happening to us, first of all, that things are happening to us instead of for us, but also that when we feel something wrong in our body, that it must be some disease, something that we can label in the medical field. And we really look last at the psycho or spiritual side of things. And we avoid digging into the psyche and figuring out what that really looks like, because there's been so much, maybe because it's the taboo that's been placed around it. But I just was wondering, since you went through that whole course of action of seeing, okay, I figured out now I have this thing in me, this Lyme disease. How do I rid myself of something, which Lyme disease is, they say you can't rid yourself of it if you talk about the mainstream medical society, right? But we've had now several people on the show who are specialists at getting rid of Lyme disease. And they also speak to that same idea of, there are some things you can do to bind this stuff and get it, pass it, detox it out of your system. But there's so much of it that is actually only conquered by doing that inner work and seeing why you're holding on to this disease, why you're identifying with this thing. So I would
Absolutely.
love for you to dive deeper into your experience on that before we move on.
Thank you. I will, because I think it's such an important thing to be thinking about, even in this current situation we find ourselves in with this COVID epidemic, pandemic, I guess you could say. So yes, I mean, I think that, occasionally someone gets bit by a tick and they get a bug and they can treat it within, 3 weeks. Maybe there are appropriate circumstances for some short-term use of antibiotics. But when someone gets an infection and it really takes hold and becomes this chronic thing, usually there's deeper levels of dissonance that have to be identified and cleared so that you can then clear on that physical level and rid yourself of the infection. And it's almost like the infection is symbolic on some level of this deeper dissonance that you have. I've always thought about, and I've noticed so many times in my medical practice, in my really sick patients, that as they do the clearing on a really deep level, it's like they can finally shed these infections, and
like spontaneous self-healing in a sense.
Yeah. And a lot of times there's some sort of breaching of boundaries, like early in life. It's like there's some traumatic experiences that create almost like a rift in this energetic cocoon that is our human biofield. And the bacteria can almost come in on that, slide in on that same kind of pathway. And when, ideally, the only thing that should be in our personal space, and not just the space of our body, but our whole energetic field, should be the only thing should be our personal unique signature. It's almost like this beautiful, unique piece of music that no one else has, and it's incredibly weakening and incredibly disruptive if that our boundaries are breached early in life, and there's other energies that enter our system, because it's almost then like two pieces of music are being played at the same time, and it's just that it creates this chaos and can drown out our unique strength and signatures. So a lot of times what I've noticed, whether it's in a small way or a big way, people that are battling like kind of lifelong or many years long situations with chronic infectious disease, they often have, these early childhood injuries or wounds. And then there's things that are a little bit subtler than that. So you've got that, and there are plenty of people that don't have that in their personal histories, but we're all also programmed to one degree or another by our familial conditioning, our cultural conditioning, and these kinds of forces imprint deep impressions in our psyche about ourselves. So it really shapes how we feel about ourselves, and therefore what we feel we deserve and the choices that we end up making in our lives. And so, my whole kind of take on health and disease right now has a lot to do with this concept of resonance, dissonance, and this accumulation of dissonance that happens to us as we go through life really can start to weaken our system and make us more susceptible to infections, cancer, whatever it is that we're challenged with.
Yeah. Wow. I really love the way that you put that into words that I can actually visualize, the boundary breach that I think happens for so many people. I think so many people can relate to that. And again, like you're saying, whether it's in your early childhood and it's with a parental figure, or it's through society and through our culture, there are breaches that are happening, especially for young people, that stay with us forever. And then we feel like, well, my boundaries were crossed there. So we're just kind of figure that's the way life is. And so we might as well allow other yucky things in. This is all subconscious, of course, but I totally get that. Thank you for making it a visual practice for me to go through that with you too. I want to get into your work, and I hope you can explain to us what the unified field is and how we can emerge from it. That's a big piece of your work for sure.
Yeah. So the unified field is the sea, the way I see it, it's the sea of energy and information that we exist within. And not only do we exist within it, but it exists within us. And we and everything else in our physical reality emerges from that. And a lot of my thinking around this is grounded in contemporary physics. And interestingly, for so long, we used to think about space and, kind of when you're looking at being at a subatomic level, you're looking at an atom and you've got these subatomic particles whirling around in this space. And we used to think of that space as empty. In fact, it was termed the vacuum in physics and always referred to as the vacuum, meaning like devoid of anything. And what's changing in new thinking in physics is this sense that is absolutely not empty, instead is infinitely full of energy and information. So I feel that, and there's a lot of evidence to suggest that everything is emerging from this. And that whole kind of spiritual concept of, oh, we're all one, or we're all connected, we're starting to see there's actually some scientific evidence for that. We are all part of this one thing. All of creation, all of our physical reality is all stemming from this one thing.
Wow. Yeah. So the unified field. Okay. I mean, that makes total sense. Us being, and I kind of liken it to when we think about the microbiome, we think about this whole set of bugs, a big variety of bugs that make us up, inside of ourselves. And we're really just one little bug in the huge microbiome on this, planet. And then, as you continue out into space, this planet's just one of many, and in a collective cosmos. So yeah, that's really beautiful. I love the way that you just are able to kind of configure things so that, I don't know, for me, it helps my brain to see things a little more clearly. So thank you for doing the work to get you to be able to articulate that way. Appreciate it.
I thought it was really cool too. During the Unify event, you said something about how when the sperm hits the egg, there's like a flash of light, which was that was a really cool visual. I also wanted to discuss with you what exactly our 3-dimensional blueprint is.
So this is conceptual, no one really knows, but my sense is that everything is emerging from a blueprint of sorts. So I think it's good to maybe, before answering that, just step back and say, what is information really? And if you've got this kind of vast, undifferentiated sea of energy, how does something emerge out of that? So a wave has a frequency and a wavelength that kind of distinguishes it from other waves that have a different frequency and a wavelength. So you can almost imagine in this undifferentiated sea, there's certain part that slows down and creates a wave, and then another one with possibly a different frequency, and then they can intersect and create almost like these vortices in the field. And then if you imagine that a vortice would allow for the kind of, it creates the energy and information of a subatomic particle, which then can coalesce with other subatomic particles emerging out of the field to create an atom. And then, so there's this sense that there's a field, like a 3-dimensional blueprint of sorts. And I see it as a series of vortices in the field that create the information for something to emerge. And so back to what you were saying about the sperm and the egg. So when the sperm penetrates the egg, even current science agrees that there is a flash of light. And it's actually been shown that the brighter that flash of light is, the healthier the embryo is.
Wow.
And so my sense is it's like this photoacoustic boom when this event happens that starts to create this blueprint in the field. And then the blueprint is guiding the differentiation and growth as an embryo, and later our exquisitely complex physiology. We've got 37 trillion cells, each with millions of events happening every second in a coordinated manner. And, no one can explain how that is happening. Like, what is actually orchestrating that level of complexity? It's like we do not have anything that can approximate that in terms of technology or quantum computing or anything like that. So there's this extraordinary miracle happening, and where's that coordination coming from? And so my sense is that it is coming from this blueprint that's providing this kind of coherency and structure and orchestration for our physiology.
And how does exposure to toxins or medications, pathogens, emotional trauma, and all the environmental pollution like Wi-Fi and all that stuff cause dissonance to that blueprint?
Well, so one thing that I also love to say before I answer that, because I think it's really fundamental to understanding how dissonance plays a role, is that current physics is really talking about now how nothing is static in the universe. Like, there actually matter is forming and annihilating trillions of times a second. So how is that happening, and how does it reform? I think that the fact that it does reform is it's according to this blueprint. So the physical body and this blueprint are in this constant communication. It's like the blueprint is forming the body, and then as we go through life, things are happening to us and to our bodies, and every single thing has an energetic signature associated with it. You've got a vitamin, and you can put it on an oscilloscope and you can read the energetic signature of vitamin C, let's say. Or you could put a strep bacteria, or you could put a toxin like mercury or something like that. Every single thing has an energetic signature. You think about a trauma that we go through, and all of the perhaps it generated a lot of emotions that we were not fully equipped to completely handle at the time, and so we just kind of stuff those in our system. That all has an energetic signature associated with it that is reverberating. And so the way I see it is, when we pull into our systems things that have energetic signatures that are not necessarily in harmony with that orchestra of our personal signature, those dissonant signatures get kind of overlaid over the blueprint, so to speak, so that then when the blueprint is forming the physical body every trillionth of a second, it's doing so through the dissonance, let's say. So instead of this really crystal clear translation of the blueprint, there begins to be distortion, and that is the nidus, or the beginning of aging, breakdown, disease. And when there's less dissonance that we accumulate, there's this beautiful back and forth communication with the blueprint. You get this high fidelity recording every trillionth of a second, because there's nothing in the way. And so you see like a child, for example, who's just beaming with life, and the bright face, and radiating beautiful energy, and super energetic, and running all around, and like they're not tired, so it's you occasionally see it in an adult. You know,
Mm-hmm.
you will notice that, especially as you start getting older, and you'll look around at people your own age, and then there's just starts to be such a discrepancy between how quickly people seem to age.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like some people are still very youthful and other people are not, and like what's at the root of that? You know, I think it's a really important question to ask.
Yeah.
So off of that, you know, you listed a lot of the things that we're exposed to in our culture, in our surroundings, from the air we breathe to the media we consume. There's going to be stressors that are unavoidable for sure for humans.
Yeah.
What do we do to keep ourselves in the resonance you're talking about there, instead of in that dissonance that causes the hyper aging and the things that we don't want to happen?
Yeah. Well, I really think it's that we need to do our own work so that we kind of unpack our personal programming that affects how we feel about ourselves and what we feel like we deserve, and therefore then dictates the kind of choices that we make.
Mm.
You know, there's going to be things right now in the world that are not necessary, that we're exposed to, that create dissonance in our system, that are not necessarily our personal choices. You know, like what's happening environmentally and all the chemicals that are being dumped into the atmosphere, and the 5G towers now that are, that's being installed everywhere that we're exposed to, and the chemtrails, and, you know, all of that. So those things, you know, affect us, and, you know, they may not be our personal choices, and, you know, we can do what we can to, like, you know, speak about it and speak up and vote or whatever and try to make some changes there. But on a personal level, it's really about the choices that we're making. You know, are we eating food that's nourishing? Are we choosing just comfort foods? You know, are we eating food for fuel? Are we overeating? You know, are we drinking pure structured water, or just water out of the tap with the fluoride and the chlorine and, you know, the drug residues and things like that? Are we using personal care products that are not laden with chemicals and estrogen mimicking compounds and, you know, things like that? Or, you know, are we buying them at Safeway? Or, you know, are we happy in our relationships? You know, are we tolerating disrespect? You know, are we living our truth? Are we really living? Are we speaking out, you know, kind of getting in tune with what our true gifts are and expressing those, or not? You know, there's just every choice affects how well we resonate with our blueprint, because you're either living a life that like leads to the accumulation of more dissonance, or you're not, or better, you're transmuting the dissonance that has occurred.
Maybe you can speak more on that, the transmutation portion. And I, just to be clear, because dissonance is maybe a word we don't use that often, but
Yeah.
I'm hearing dissonance as the word dis-ease, you know, in the sense of anywhere where you're made uneasy, and you're speaking specifically about taking responsibility for the choices that may have brought you to that. So how do we go about transmuting the dissonance that maybe we already experienced? So it's, you know, it's left its trails in us. It's left a groove in us of trauma. You know, you can talk about it in terms that we use a lot on the show, I guess. So these trauma grooves, how do we go about transmuting those into something that can be resonance? It can be of higher, brighter light.
Great question. Well, one way, I believe, is in meditation.
Okay.
So in deep states of meditation, there is an opportunity to become aware of our unique signature and what feels like a foreign addition in our field. You know, for example, you might be sitting in meditation and realize, oh, in my solar plexus, there's a lot of tension in there right now. And then if you sit with it long enough, you might say, oh, okay, that got tweaked when I had an interaction with someone yesterday that reminded me
Yeah.
of something that happened to me with, with my father when I was 10, or what, who knows what it is, but like, you might have the opportunity to kind of tune in that you had been holding a lot of tension there. And then almost like once you've become aware of it, that's what the body wanted. And then, you can then let it dissipate and let it ground off. Or you may have, like I said, that unmetabolized emotion from previous traumas or whatnot, and you may start to feel it, held in certain body postures that have become habitual to you, or there's a lot of people with their shoulders up or their head forward or whatever, and it's literally like this kind of encoding in the physical body of unresolved energy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's like your body contains your biography, your energetic anatomy, stores all of that. So if you tune in on a deep level on a regular basis, there's an opportunity to just kind of identify that and learn from it, and to let it go.
Wow. So I'm seeing this as the body, I'm hearing it as the body is a tool for being able to almost witness your three-dimensional blueprint. So then you can get really clear with what your personal unique signature is, so that whenever what you're calling a foreign something, something that doesn't belong to you comes into that space, essentially, whether it's an emotion, it's a some sort of what is it called, residue from something you experienced, comes into that space, you can identify it right away as that's actually not mine. So I don't need to take it on and embody it into my blueprint, because it's not resonating with it. It's not aligned with it. And instead look at it clearly, decide what to do with it, and move it, out, hopefully, of your body, detox it out of your body one way or another. And meditation is a tool that you think is really powerful for getting us clear on that identity with our signature self.
Exactly.
Yourself.
Once you really figure out who you are and get the sense of that unique vibration of who you are, then you can figure out who you're not. You can just you can be like, oh, that doesn't feel like me. That doesn't feel like the rest of this. I'm gonna try to tune into it and understand what it is and where it came from, and then decide, do I want to keep that or do I want to let it go?
Why do we have so much damn resistance to tools like meditation, sitting still?
I think it's because it does take some discipline. It takes some discipline. And a lot of people, and I notice this with, I've had this myself at different points in my life, and then I've seen it with others. It's like, if there is something uncomfortable in the system left over from previous traumas or whatnot, there's this wanting to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah.
It's just that there's this sense of like, oh, wow, if I tapped into that well, I'd be overcome. I would be overwhelmed. Yeah.
It's scary.
And what people will what a lot of times figure out is when they tune into it and tap into it and sit with it, not only are they not overwhelmed, but they almost like become friends with it on some level, and it's actually this process of becoming whole, instead of being fractured. And it is just a really beautiful process. And then, and then you can almost embrace aspects of yourself that have been hidden, or suppressed, as well as, kind of love yourself for what you've gone through, and kind of give yourself something that you maybe never received, which is the kind of safety, love, acceptance, so really it a lot of times we're not willing to do that ourselves, and then we're looking outside of ourselves for that type of thing, and it never feels like enough, because what we ultimately want is that from ourselves.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that meditation isn't for them, but that they get the same thing from like maybe working out or going for a jog. And I get that that might clear the mind, but there's something that comes from the stillness where you're forced to just tune in, like you said.
Absolutely. I think that, whatever it is that stills the mind is a lovely prelude to then sitting in meditation, whether it's breathing exercise or a moving meditation or doing some exercise, but then sitting down and just spending some time with yourself is so important.
Yeah.
And then you were asking, what else can you do to transmute?
Yeah.
I think your emotional state is so important, and it's very much dictated by our thinking. So, it's like we have a thought, and then that engenders an emotional reaction oftentimes, which is associated with the release of neurotransmitters and hormones that each have their own signatures associated with them. So that cocktail that's produced has a collective signature that either enhances our health or diminishes our health. And I talked a little previously on the talk on Unify that you heard about Dr. David Hawkins,
Yeah.
who mapped the vibratory rate of emotional states. And he did it with kinesiology testing, which some people don't think is a legitimate scientific tool, but he did this over years with numerous subjects and multiple testers, and the results were reproducible over years. And so he found that every emotional state has a vibratory rate, and though, and he put them on a logarithmic scale from 1 to 1,000, and he said that those that were under 200 were weakening to the body, and those that were over 200 were strengthening. And so emotional states like joy, which calibrates at 540 on this logarithmic scale, have this extremely beneficial effect on our physiology. And I think that the more time we spend in these kind of higher vibrational emotional states of joy, love, peace, bliss,
Gratitude,
like these things do have a transmuting effect on dissonant frequencies in our system.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. I love that. This is kind of the same question in a different direction, but you mentioned static. How do things that cause static in our lives affect our bodies, our immune system, and maybe what are some examples of those things?
So we talked about a few of them already. So I would say like dirty electromagnetic field information in our environments, sleeping with our head next to Wi-Fi, or having a Wi-Fi router going all night, even smart meters on our home, like that creates a level of static that affects us. But so do low vibrational emotional states.
Right.
If you walk around and you're constantly angry about things, like angry about how someone treated you, or how much time your kids want to spend with you, or like how much work you have to do, or that you have to commute to work, whatever. If you just constantly are like looking at everything and just upset about it, instead of saying, why, first off, why don't my kids want to spend time with me, or why am I doing a job I don't like, or that creates a ton of static if you're constantly walking around like that. And I think when we eat foods that are not organic, they're laden with pesticides, herbicides, foods that are genetically modified, foods that aren't full of life force but are packaged and highly processed, that creates static.
Yeah, and probably a lot of what we're watching, like fear-generated news,
especially
or
right now.
Especially right now.
And violent movies, maybe even things like porn. As well.
Absolutely. I think about that a lot, and I've really been trying to counsel my patients right now to just like, if you need to take a break from the media, please do, because it's just, I think it's weakening people.
Yeah.
And when you do get out, because I feel like all of us, you know, we're kind of shut in, or we don't get enough time out in nature, especially right now with what's going on. When you get, I happened to have taken a nature walk 2 days ago that was long overdue because I've been shut in for a while. And you can't help but be joyous and blissful in nature. You will find a reason to, you know, I was listening to someone who we're a big fan of, Eric Gotze, the other day, talk about nature because someone asked him, someone was living in New York and sent a question in that said, how can I experience more nature when I'm in the middle of the city? And he said, remember that you're in nature. You are nature. Like you're literally, this city that's built up around you is part of your anthill, essentially. You know, you're in nature at all times, but sometimes you do need to physically be near a tree or, you know, physically be on earth, on the ground. I wanted to ask you if you're open to sharing, and if you're not, don't worry, we can cut this out. But because we're talking about all these ways to identify in ourselves where we might be breeding this like toxicity and this dissonance, where we could be better about being more coherent or more having resonance with our thoughts, or I want to call it like alignment, you know, with what our signature self is, like, to use your words. Do you have some big places that when you started doing that inner spiritual psychological work for yourself, when you were working on curing yourself of Lyme disease, were there some big epiphanies that came out of that you were like, oh, like, aha, like this was a moment where I definitely see this was tying itself to all these diseases, diseases, I should say, you know, all these places in me that were uneasy. Did you have any of those moments that you could like identify specifically, maybe for a person listening that goes, I don't even know what that looks like?
Yeah, I think for me, it was noticing that I wasn't fully inhabiting my body. I wasn't fully grounded in my system. And it was almost like living from here up more, you know, just more in my head and not fully grounded in. And so then I needed to realize like, oh, okay, there were some things in my early childhood that created some kind of disruption in my first chakra, let's say, that affected my grounding and just my sense of really owning this incarnation, you know, this physical body of mine. Like I'm a spirit, but I'm in a physical body. I've chosen to be here. I'm going to own this completely, you know. And so I think that when people are not fully embodied, there's an opportunity for other things to fill where what you're not occupying, you know. So, and that's kind of, I'm speaking on an energetic level.
Yeah.
So then that was where, in my case, the Lyme bacteria kind of got a foothold, because it was not, there was some vacancy, you know, that it could fill. And so then I needed to really own certain parts of my being and realize places where, you know, I wasn't so present literally on a physical level. Then there would be worse circulation and you know, kind of constricted energy. And that's where the Borrelia bacteria wanted to just take hold, because it's like it could kind of replicate unimpeded in that area. My immune system wasn't going in there rushing in to take care of it. So it's like, as I was kind of starting to occupy my whole being, it's like everything was, my body could rush in and take care of things.
Was that about getting into more of a heart-centered space instead of being intellectual about your issues? So was that, and that came through meditation, a lot of sitting with yourself?
Yeah, meditation, working with a couple healers. And I ended up going through one of the most powerful things I did was I attended the Academy of Intuition Medicine in Sausalito, near where I live. And it was this 2-year program of meditating and just spending time in my energetic anatomy and learning about that, and really learning how to differentiate what we were talking about before, my unique signature from the signature of other things, and clear that and just fully own my space.
Gosh, why does it seem like that's the last thing we learn on this planet, if we ever learn it while we're in these human bodies?
Yeah, I know. I would
backwards.
love it if we just train our kids like that.
Yeah. Seems very backwards for sure.
Yeah.
Sure does.
At least I feel like it's starting to be the trend, to where like maybe the next generation or the generation after will be different. You brought up before that viruses are not alive, and that our emotional state has so much power over what happens when a virus does enter our body. But what else can we do to strengthen our immune system?
When we think about our immune system, it's this incredibly intricate, coordinated set of different types of cells and all these various intermediates. It's a very complex system. So one thing that's critical is this resonating with our blueprint in a seamless way, because that provides this beautiful orchestration of our immune system. So on a physical level, there's certain supplements that are really helpful, like beta glucan is one of my favorites right now, because it is taken up, when it's cleaved to the right size, it's taken up by roving macrophages that are like our immune surveillance cells, and then that triggers gene expression in the macrophage, which produces large quantities of intermediates that then orchestrate and initiate other aspects of the immune response. So beta glucan is a lovely thing, and then of course a lot of nutrients we know about, like vitamin C and zinc, and some herbs, astragalus, andrographis, echinacea, and vitamin D, all very important for our immune system. But everything else we've talked about so far is super important for our immune system. Keeping our emotional vibration up, so not succumbing to the fear, really buying into this kind of fear-based media that we're all being exposed to. Maybe trying to either distance ourselves from that, or think critically about what we're being told. I really think it's an absolute shame. I think there's a lot of misinformation being propagated in conventional channels, CNN, and like not just on social media with people that don't really know what they're talking about, but really coming from what the vast majority of people think are trusted sources, credible sources, like, and then I think sadly, policies are being made by politicians that don't have a true appreciation for the science, and they are also buying into the misinformation being fed them.
And it's also profit over people, and
it's a really sad time.
It gets to a very slippery place where we get into censorship as well. So it's like, at what point do we start censoring? And and then that's a whole freedom we're taking away, and another boundary that's been breached. So
absolutely. So if I could do anything right now, I'd encourage people to think critically, just think critically. It's like
for themselves.
For themselves, so it's like, we can't, a lot of our healing process and coming to a state of health is to look at everything that we were taught, really, that imprinted and like programmed us with beliefs that affect how we feel about ourselves, beliefs that affect the choices that we make. And a healing process is really going in and dissecting each and every one of those and saying, do I want to keep this one, or should I throw it out? Like, is it helping me or is it not? And so that is absolutely the stance that we need to be taking every day with what is coming at us from the media. It's like, does this sound correct? Or not? Is there a motivation behind this? And if so, what is it?
it's hard with the critical thinking because you have some people that their critical thinking is just trusting CDC because they spend billions of dollars on research. And so they're like, how could my critical thinking be any better than billions of dollars of research? So I'm just going to trust what the CDC says. And then there's people who are thinking, their critical thinking is, well, yeah, but they're making even more off vaccinations. And so I'm not going to trust what they're saying because they don't actually have my best interest at heart. And then those people are posting so much of their strong feelings, and that's, you know, part of the fear and the anger even towards each other. But I was curious if you could speak to how vaccinations might affect our immune system as well.
Okay. So, you know, I've heard a lot of people that are coming from my perspective say, and a lot of people don't believe them, I'm not exactly anti-vaccination. You know, I think that there is something to be said for inducing a specific immune response. And, you know, we successfully eradicated smallpox off the planet. And, you know, that was a disease that killed many, many people. And so this was a good thing. So, you know, vaccines just as a whole are not necessarily bad for our immune system. What I do think is harmful to our immune system is when there are multiple vaccinations that each have their own adjuvants and preservatives in them that are given to children with very young, underdeveloped, in some cases undeveloped immune systems. You're giving them so many vaccines at one time. I think that actually has a deleterious effect on our health, you know, and on our immune system. And I think in the case of now, the situation we find ourselves in with COVID, you know, it's a pretty scary prospect to be thinking about a vaccine against an RNA virus, because for one, they mutate so rapidly that, you know, if you make one, it's not necessarily going to be effective to protect you against the strain that's there even a few months later. And it's notoriously hard to do. Sometimes you make an antibody to the viral antigens, but it doesn't inactivate the virus, but it almost makes a bigger thing, you know, your antibody bound to an antigen of the virus that then your own system can recognize as foreign. And so it can, you know, I fear that rushing a viral vaccine, a COVID viral vaccine to market could be dangerous because it might start some autoimmune conditions in people.
That's more where my fear lies, being forced to do something like that.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people feel the same way, thankfully. And, you know, so I'm not so certain that this agenda is going to be successful.
I think it's really critical, though, just to reiterate the piece you said there about our thoughts affecting our immune system and being such a big piece. Like, we want to have all these external ways that we can pump up our immune system, you know, and be ready and take the vitamin C and do all the things. But our thoughts, you know, I know people probably dismiss this. I know people listening are probably going, yeah, that can't hold that much clout on my immune system. But I know it does. I mean, you know, I feel it in my system the same way whenever I'm feeling shitty and stressed and whatever. You feel
that's the only time I get sick too, is when I have stress in my life. So
so there's all kinds of evidence in your life, if you're listening to this and you're trying to, you know, prove that right or wrong. Just like Dr. McDougall's here saying, think for yourself. You know, think critically for yourself about what your own experiences have been with your immune system and your thoughts and what is going on in your life when you got really sick, maybe. Okay, so to move us on, though, from that, I want to talk to you about this study of the healing properties of water that you've been recently immersed in. So can you explain to us how structured water is fundamental to cellular vitality and what exactly structured water is? And maybe even go into the do's and don'ts with water.
Yeah, water is an incredible topic. uh, we're 60% water by weight in our body, but actually, because water is such a small molecule, we're 99% water by molecules. And
Wow.
that's really hard to imagine, but it's like,
Yeah.
because we have other molecules that are so large,
Okay.
and the water molecules are so small that there's almost not a place in the body where they don't exist.
Right. Wow.
So
Hmm.
of course you have water in your bloodstream and water in your lymphatic fluid and
Mm-hmm.
cerebral spinal fluid, but you have structured water, which I'll talk about, inside your cells, and you have water molecules kind of intercalating within other molecules. So, like, for
Mm.
example, imagine your double helical DNA. You've got water wrapping all throughout it. So in between the bonds,
Yeah.
you have water, and it actually is structuring in a helical form all the way around the DNA spirals.
So we're just
So
swimming all the time.
water
Yeah.
is
Or a
everywhere.
human submarine.
Yeah. And like inside our cells, you have these little things called microtubules, which you can almost think of as the scaffolding inside of our cells.
Mm-hmm.
And microtubules can connect to microtubules in neighboring cells. And inside, it's full of water. And water is actually thought to be kind of almost like a superconductor
Mm-hmm.
within the microtubules, and that is one of the ways that information is traveling quickly from one cell to another throughout the body. And then every cell of our body is anchored down to what you could say a basement membrane, or like a matrix, and that extracellular matrix is mostly water. And so there's water is everywhere in the body. And water can exist in various forms. We've learned, you've got the solid ice cube and
Mm-hmm.
steam and liquid water, but we're learning that there is a fourth phase of water, and that's like a gel. And that is the structured form of water. And microscopically, if you're looking at it, it's like sheets of water molecules lined up in a particular way that almost looks like a honeycomb. And so
Hmm.
you've got a sheet of these honeycomb water molecules on, and then another sheet on top of that, and another sheet on top of that, and you can see these layers lining up, for the millions and millions of layers.
Mm-hmm.
And water molecules will line up like that along interfaces within the body. So on the outside of your cell membrane, on the inside of your cell membrane, on the outside of your intracellular organelles, even within the intracellular organelles, water structures itself like this. And it actually does, it's no longer H2O, it becomes something different. It's actually H3O2.
Hmm.
And that what happens when it turns like that is it has to pump a proton out of this zone of structure. And so it becomes negatively charged in the structure zone. And then there's a zone of positive charges outside of that. And that charge separation sets up like a battery effect.
Mm-hmm.
And we're starting to learn that battery effect is responsible for fueling a lot of what's happening in the body. So it's fueling the movement of your red blood cells through your neural capillaries, and, fueling some of the chemical reactions that are happening.
Wow.
So it's super
Fascinating.
complex and a deep and fascinating subject, but I mean, to suffice it to say,
Yeah.
it's one of the most important elements in our body. And I I think about, communication with the blueprint,
Yeah.
and our I feel like structured water within the body amplifies the exchange of energy and information with the field. So it's kind of like a conduit between our
Mm.
biology and the energy and information that's coming from the unified field through our blueprint. So without water, we would be exchanging a lot less with the environment that we emerge from.
So this, when you're talking about structured water, that's the water that has decided to align itself with parts of our bodies, our molecules, all the places in our body that use water as a conductor.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then people talk a lot about different technologies that structure water that we would consume.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you think about water in nature, how it typically, if it were as nature intended, water would be kind of bubbling up from deep layers of the earth and traversing different mineral layers and whatnot on its way up to the surface in a mountain spring or something like that. And then, it'd be going down a mountain spring and it would be moving over the rocks and kind of eddying and, swirling and all of that. That water that we would pull out of that spring, let's say, and, if nature was as pristine as it used to be, would be structured to a degree.
It's basically prepared for us to consume it by that point.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And what we've learned is that water also retains information. And it retains information of everything that it comes in contact with. So if it really were bubbling up from the earth as nature intended, and going through all the different strata and, the mineral content of the different layers of the earth, it would be imbued with all of the mineral frequencies and things like that it contacted. And
even the sunshine.
And then the sunshine would affect it once it comes up to the surface. So yeah, I mean, ideally that's what we should be drinking. And so we're not. So we have to figure out, like, how do we come, how can we almost like recapitulate that? How can we recreate that perfect water that we really should be consuming?
Yeah. And what is the difference when you're having bottled water? What is the difference? Because I know that's a lot of people, it's just the easy route.
Yeah. And it all depends on where does that bottled water come from, because some of it is reverse osmosis water that's, then put in a bottle. Some of it is from a spring, and, there's other purification methods that are being used. So you have to ask, like, okay, well, where did that water come from, and how was it made?
Treated,
treated, I guess is a better way to say it. And then you want to say, what's happening when it's in the plastic bottle?
That's what I more think.
Sits in a truck that's baking in the sun, and and then it's sitting in the grocery store for a long time before you drink it. So yes, we for convenience are using bottled water, but I think in the perfect world, we should all have home systems and things like that to purify our own water.
What do you have a recommendation on that?
Yeah, I do. But right now, one of my goals is to try to make something that's affordable for people.
Yeah, that's
like the one I have in my house is really expensive.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I would love to just rattle off like 10 recommendations. Right now, I would say even the zero water from Bed Bath & Beyond,
that's what I use.
That's a good one. And then if you could put it on a structuring device of some sort, that would help you before you drink it. But stay tuned. We'll have some
good. I'm glad there's some hope in the future for water. Oh, good. Okay, so if you guys are listening, you haven't noticed yet, energetic technologies are kind of your niche, and the services you offer are super amazing, and it's exciting to know that these even exist. So can you give us a general overview of some of those services that you offer? And I just want to note that the BAH and the ACMOS are two of the ones that we were most intrigued for knowing more about. So,
yeah. Okay. Well, the BAH stands for Bioresonance Analysis of Health. And I learned this from a doctor that developed it, Dr. Thomas Schultz. He's practicing in New York, but he's originally from Poland, and he learned how to utilize this device called a Lecker antenna, which is an instrument that's actually well known in the field of physics. It's a handheld, non-electronic instrument that is a wire on a sliding shunt.
Mm-hmm.
Wish I had one I could show you guys, but anyway, you can basically ask yes or no questions with it.
Okay.
And you can ask a lot of other things too. You can measure the kind of the energetic vibration of things with this device. So this device was originally developed in the late 1800s by a Austrian physicist named Ernst Lecker, and it was originally developed to measure subtle fluctuations in the Earth's electromagnetic field.
Okay.
But anyway, Dr. Schultz adapted it to measuring the health of a human being. And so you can either have a person hold a mass that's connected to this device, or you can actually take a drop of blood of a person and put it on a slide. And the blood contains all the information of the person, because through the concept of quantum entanglement, you know, the blood is in communication with the body itself. And some interesting experiments, just on a side note, were done by William Tiller at Stanford, where he sent some people's blood, you know, so they had a whole group of people, and he sent a sample of their blood to Edinburgh, Scotland, and then did experiments where he exposed the person to kind of to different sorts of images, and then measured the response of the blood halfway across the world. So we see that the person and their blood is entangled, and
wow, and they could see a correlation.
Absolutely. So anyway,
those spooky particles at a distance, is that the theory?
Yeah, exactly. So with this, I can ask yes or no questions of the person and person's innate intelligence, let's say. And it is, so Dr. Schultz devised this algorithm of question asking so that you can kind of cover the, like, a really broad swath look at someone's health. You know, I'm looking at, do they have heavy metals? Do they have vitamin deficiencies, mineral deficiencies, hormone imbalances? Do they have infectious diseases? And if it's a yes, is it a viral infection or a parasitic infection or a bacteria or you know, then I'm looking at how much is emotional stress playing a role? Are they exposed to electromagnetic fields? How much is that playing a role? Is there any sort of geopathic stress where they're living? You know, do they have some deep-seated psychospiritual stress? Is that a big factor? And then I'm looking at, you know, what organ is most dysfunctional at this time, and what's their level of overall toxicity. So I'm just kind of doing this kind of broad yes or no questioning until I kind of come up with a set of underlying factors that are at play with a person's health. Let's say they have Parkinson's disease. Well, is this Parkinson's because of glyphosate, or is it because of heavy metal exposure? Do they have like a large degree of manganese in their body? Do they have small intestinal overgrowth or a lot of intestinal parasites? Do they have Lyme disease? Do they have, you know, any of the tick-borne co-infections or viral reactivation? And is it a set of all those factors in this particular case? And so then I'm looking at then, how do I devise a treatment protocol? And I'm asking their body. And because, you know, there might be 30 ways to detox mercury out of a person. Right. And some of those are not compatible with their system and would create a lot of dissonance in their system. So I'm looking at what is the best way to proceed. Or maybe it's not time to do mercury detox. Maybe I have to first treat their gut and, you know, open up pathways of elimination. And then I can start the detox of mercury. And so it's a way of having a conversation with their body where I can get the real information. And then a lot of times I back it up, because I've been doing this now for so many years, is that if I find, oh, lo and behold, this person with chronic fatigue syndrome actually has an infected root canal, I will send them to the biological dentist to have a 3-dimensional CAT scan to verify that. And sure enough, they have that, they treat that, and it helps them tremendously.
What's the accuracy rate with this type of thing?
Well, I think it differs depending on the practitioner, but I feel like my accuracy rate is extremely high. It's just because I've had, years now of correlating the energetic testing with the actual testing. And it's just that it hones a little bit the testing that I go ahead and do. Because, sometimes someone comes in with a complex medical problem and there's multiple underlying factors. It could be a $15,000 workup if I were just going to test every possibility.
Right.
And so it's a way of saying, okay, this person doesn't need to go to the biological dentist for that 3-dimensional CAT scan, but this person does. And this person I should go ahead and do heavy metal testing on. And this person needs a small bowel overgrowth test. You know what I'm saying? So like I can kind of hone it down to let's of course, using my clinical judgment and intuition, and then that data to direct the analysis.
Is the actual testing, is it, first of all, is it exhausting for the patient because you're tapping into these energy lines? Is there any kind of
Not at all.
exhaustion? No?
Not at all.
I wonder, is it related to like the biomeridian system, the way that we would think about how energy flows through the body, like in a acupuncturist's office where they're tapping in? Are you tapping into the same system?
I'm doing that quite a bit when I'm doing an ACMOS treatment.
Oh, okay.
So the ACMOS is it uses the same instrument, so the Lecker antenna. And now, whereas the BAH is more diagnostic, the ACMOS is more therapeutic. Okay. So with this, I'm first doing baseline measurements on the person's energetic field. So I'm looking at, is it balanced or imbalanced? And I'm testing at various frequencies how their field is balanced. And if it's imbalanced, then I go through this process of asking their bodies, well, what pieces of misinformation are throwing their field off? Is it, so then I'll be going through again an algorithm of questions, and, let's say it's heavy metals. So then I can actually draw the signature of heavy metals out of the system. It doesn't mean that it's out for good. If they still have a huge body burden of mercury, the signature is going to come back. But let's say, when you make a homeopathic solution, the water retains the signature of what it was exposed to. So I'm going to do a little aside for a moment.
Sure.
You take a glass of water and put some magnesium in there and shake it up. And then you take a small portion of that, you put it in another glass of water, you shake that up, and then you dilute it down, till there's no more molecules of magnesium left in the sample, or atoms, I should say. And it will still retain the signature of magnesium. Okay, so
it's like a residual of intent.
It's residual energetic dissonance from once having had that there. Okay. Or let's not say dissonance in the case of magnesium, it's just the signature. Okay. But in the body, let's say when I'm looking at dissonance, someone could have had, let's say, an infection with Giardia, and it's gone now, but the signature of it is still there, and it's reverberating, and it's still throwing the body off. And so that through ACMOS, I can identify that and then select signature of something else that's in resonance with that dissonant piece of information, and draw it out of the system toward that, almost like toward a magnet. And previously you were asking, what is resonance? What's dissonance? So it's like a great way to understand that concept is with tuning forks. Like if I had a tuning fork in the key of C, and there was another one in the room in the key of C, if I were to strike this tuning fork, the other one would ring. But if I had one in the room that was in the key of A or the key of B, they would not ring. So the two key of C tuning forks would ring because they're in resonance with one another. And we're in resonance with our blueprint. And then we start accumulating these things in our body that create static, create chaos, and they throw off our ability to resonate with our blueprint. And it's almost like there's something in the way. It's like I can come up with an analogy, but does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And it brings to mind, even when you were talking about needing to be grounded and where you were feeling you had, well, you didn't even know, maybe subconsciously you were experiencing this chaos that you're speaking to, the static that you're speaking to, and you needed to be more grounded in your body. And that, all what you just said, also brought me to thinking about a conversation we just had with Roland McCready from Heart Math Institute.
Oh, I liked him.
Yeah, about the way that the human body resonates, vibrates at the same frequency as Earth, 0.01 hertz, and that when we're not grounded, literally in that coherent, resonant state where we're feeling joy, bliss, gratitude, the things you've described in this conversation, being the positive state of humanity, we are not resonating with Earth. We're literally not grounded, into the ground here. So that's just really fascinating that you have tools that can show you the places in us that we're experiencing this type of dissonance. I think that's really neato.
Yeah, it's exciting to know
along that line, like with the Lecker antenna, I can see if the person's energetic field has that 7.8 hertz frequency there or not. Like I can literally measure, like, are they grounded? Are they receiving that nourishing vibration up from the earth, or is there something interfering with that?
That is so cool.
It's really neat. And then you were asking about, Mercedes was asking about the meridians. And so with the ACMOS, a lot of times the dissonance will center in a certain area, and it often throws off a meridian or an acupuncture point. The dissonance will kind of cause that point to not really be transmitting properly to the rest, to the rest of the channel, let's say. And so then I'll pull out that dissonance, and that dissonance, while it was there, was throwing off the earth vibration frequency right at that point, or the cosmic vibration frequency at that point. So then I have to kind of establish those appropriate vibrations that are absolutely like essential nutrients to our being.
Yeah. Does ACMOS stand for something?
Yeah, it's something like the assessment of the compatibility of matter and synergy. something unusual.
Sorry, I didn't mean this is a test.
That's so cool.
I did want to ask you, because you just said when you can recognize in these people, these clients that you're working with, that there is a blockage in their channel, it made me wonder if you've had, and if you're open to talking about this, any of your own growth in your psychic abilities or intuitive abilities that lend themselves to that kind of nature that people aren't used to really embodying, for the most part. This Jade, we have an in-house psychic here, so not all people, but I just wonder that because you're doing this work that's about getting people clear, literally, when we talk about clairvoyance, we talk about claircognizant, or any of these forms of psychic ability, if you've had any kind of that type of thing turn on for you in clearing these things out of you.
Absolutely. And you've said it so perfectly, because I think clearing out the dissonance clears the way for access to more information. So one of the things I talk about, I'm writing a book, and one of the things I talk about in my book is that there's some interesting research to suggest that thoughts and memories are not necessarily in our brains. They're not located in our brains, but they're imprinted in space memory. And so in the field around us, and our brains act like radio receivers and radio transmitters.
Wow.
So, people might say, well, if you get a stroke in the area of your hippocampus, we know, because we see clinically people's memories are deficient after that. That's true. But that part of the brain may be acting more like a radio receiver. And so what I feel like is some people, as they start clearing the way, can start to access a broader band of information.
Yeah.
So you can access your memories, and you might even be able to kind of like broaden that out or switch stations at will. So you might, like, you could almost say that your set of memories and everything are and thoughts are like a particular radio station that's unique to you, and you might be able to tune into someone else's. And so and I really believe that clearing the dissonance is the way that you access more information.
Yeah, that's really cool. Where did space memory come from for you? Is that a certain type of research or book, or
It actually is a physics term.
Okay.
We used to call the field space time, but it's actually more accurate to call it space memory. Things are imprinted in the field, much like things get imprinted in water. Water retains information. So does the kind of fabric of the unified field. And that, people talk about Akashic records, and I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's
we've had them read here on the show.
Oh, cool. It's literally like all things that have happened, and all thoughts that people think, and all memories that they have are imprinted in the field.
That's so cool.
Very cool. Yeah, there's so many directions that I would love to dig in deeper with you on it when we have more time, maybe another time.
We're coming to the end, but we have a magic mob question. Jude has 2 questions. The first is, what is your most effective tool to defy aging?
Meditation.
Yeah?
It's the best kept anti-aging secret.
I love that.
Inside
totally
and
agree.
out.
Yeah.
I just had a session with my therapist before I got on this call, and I had a big movement, whatever you want to call that, an epiphany, or, I moved something. And the way that I feel after that type of clearing is definitely younger. So,
yeah, that's true.
Just doing that type of inner work or something where you have, and meditation is a great way to get there too, which I
like that it's so inexpensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a costly cream.
So like stem cell or something.
Yeah. And so the other question that we have is about really your hormonal research, and you've spent a lot of time there with bioidentical hormones. Maybe you can just give us and our audience a glance into, I know this is going to sound like a really basic question, but I don't think our audience, I don't think generally the world, but including our audience, we have a very eclectic audience, so I'm sure some of them are extremely savvy in this realm, but what are the basics that could get people interested in looking more deeply into their hormones and the making sure that they're regulated, making sure that they're working,
and maybe how can we keep them regulated?
Just some of the basics.
That's my big question,
because I think it's the area of medicine that seems too overwhelming, or it's maybe we just think of it, sex hormones, and we just put it, that means something that they thought they already knew about. But to me, hormones is like the most fascinating science. So you have anything for us?
Me too. I mean, that's why I dove so deeply into it for so long. It's absolutely so fundamental to how we feel, to have the appropriate hormone balance. And so for me, it's all about balance. And a lot of times people that go to doctors that prescribe a hormone, they're really kind of singularly focused on one thing. Maybe or two things. And to me, it's about the balance of the whole terrain. So when I measure someone's hormones, for example, I'm looking at pituitary hormones, thyroid, adrenal, the sex steroids, all at once, but I'm looking at the balance of everything. And so Jade was saying, how do you keep your hormones balanced as you age and all of that? I'd say one of the most important things is to keep your adrenals really healthy, because your adrenals produce a lot of the hormones that can decline with age if you're under excessive stress throughout your life. And these hormones, let's say cortisol, DHEA, pregnenolone, testosterone, they're so important for our brain functioning, for our immune system, for our body composition, and for our energy level. And then the adrenals have the ability to produce, let's just talk about women, some of the same steroids that our ovaries produce. So as we're going into perimenopause, the adrenals really try to pick up the slack.
I had that.
Yeah. So if you go into perimenopause and your adrenals are weak, and then your ovaries kind of start functioning in an erratic manner, it's like a double whammy. So you really can bottom out. But instead, if you go into perimenopause with super strong adrenals, you can often weather the changes quite gracefully. So, and then it's very important to look at the thyroid in the context of the adrenals and the ovaries, because the thyroid will often go through changes at times of changes with the sex steroids. So like at the onset of puberty, or with a pregnancy, or after you deliver and you start breastfeeding, or when you stop breastfeeding, or when you go into perimenopause. Those times when the ovarian steroids shift can have a bearing on your thyroid and can throw it off sometimes. So a lot of times women go into perimenopause and they're feeling poorly, and maybe they go see a doctor who's just focuses on the estrogen and progesterone, but doesn't really look at the fact that their adrenals are weak and not contributing anything to the total amount that they have in their system, and that at the same time that their thyroid got thrown off. And now they're hypothyroid, and they start blaming everything on the loss of estrogen, and they replenish that, but lean so heavily on just that they end up having to use very high doses when they wouldn't have had to if they had looked at the entire terrain.
Yeah. And then applied lifestyle changes.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. We want to take a pill.
What's the best thing that can be done for our adrenals?
So depending on the individual, because I'll recommend different things to different people, but ashwagandha is an incredible adaptogenic herb that is super strengthening to the adrenals. It's been shown to heal the adrenal cortex and also calming to the nervous system. So like if someone has adrenal fatigue, but they're kind of wired as well, they're tired during the day, but they don't sleep well at night, and they're kind of anxious, that ashwagandha can be an awesome choice for them.
Is that also for, as men, would you recommend the same thing for men?
Yeah, I would. Okay.
And what's I'm going to turn this into my own little doctor appointment right now, just for the moment. I've heard great things about ashwagandha. So, okay, I have some, and astragalus, I have these different things, but I'm like, I get them and I'm like, now how do I use them? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do exactly. So how specifically would you recommend, like, for instance, a Jade and I, who we struggle with some dips and ebbs and flows in our hormonal cycle. We're in our mid-30s. So that's probably right around the age of perimenopause, starts kicking in. How do we treat ourselves with this herb?
So I like it in liquid form. I like it in capsule. But usually one capsule, let's say twice a day. And so morning, and most people can take it at bedtime just fine. And it actually helps their sleep Once in a while, someone feels like it's a little energizing to them, and it'd be better for them to take it in the afternoon.
Yeah.
But 1-2 a day for a while, and it can often calm anxiety, help sleep, strengthen the body, even out the energy,
level things out.
Now, for occasionally, someone finds it too calming, and then that could make them feel almost like a little sedated or something. So everyone's unique,
right?
And so I usually get a kind of read on the.
I take mine at noon because it's a tad bit of a pick me up for me.
Is it?
Yeah.
It differs for each person,
Yeah.
but generally speaking, people find that it's strengthening but calming to the nervous system. And then adrenal glandulars can be really helpful that don't have hormones in them. It's kind of analogous to our grandparents' generation that would eat organ meats when they would eat. You supply the nutritional building blocks to build the gland back up. And then, of course, just stress reduction techniques, making sure you're including salt in your diet, in your food. And
I take actually a supplement for organ meats because they're really hard to find for some reason, like the actual
grasslandmeats.com.
What is it?
Grasslandmeats.com. You can order them. Actual organ meat. They'll send it to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
I was like, what? But yeah, I think that just to reiterate this, I know we've said it a lot throughout this episode, because here we just talked about some pills, you can take to help this thing, or some herbs you can take, which are beautiful. And please do that instead of taking other, Xanax or whatever it might be to mask your ails. But again, looking really deeply into your own self, into your own shadows, and digging out what's there is probably the most powerful tool for getting to the bottom of all this.
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay, so before we let you go, there are a few short questions we like to ask everyone who comes on the show. So first off, if you could hug your younger self right now, what would you say?
Just say, you are beautiful just as you are, and I love you.
Aww. And how old are you when you're hugging yourself?
Good question. 4.
4.
That's sweet. If you could have the whole world read one book, which would it be?
The Power of Now.
Oh, I just started rereading A New Earth. So
I love that one too.
Yeah.
If you could whisper one phrase to everyone on the planet, what would it be?
You are a child of God.
I love that. I felt peace in my heart when you said it. Before we let you go, where can people find you online?
clearcenterofhealth.com.
Awesome.
clearcenterofhealth.com. Beautiful. And by the way, you guys go on there, you're going to see all the different modalities that she offers, which are you got to take a course just to know what you're getting into.
Yeah, it's so cool. Thank you so much for spending this time with us.
Thanks for having me.
This was really beautiful. I love the way that I know I said it earlier, but the way that you're able to articulate the information you're putting across is really unlike anyone else I've ever heard on these specific topics, which I feel like, we've addressed some of these topics before, but this is just a whole new perspective to look at it from. And it really, to me, is beautiful because it gives a new layer of clarity that's really needed, because these are very complicated topics that we're talking about here. So I appreciate I know tons of work that you must have put in over the last 20 years of your work in this to get so clear and articulate on these topics. I appreciate that. Thank you for being a light.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All right. So when we have the air date and the promo videos made, we'll get them over to Christian and go from there.
Perfect.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks so
have
much.
a great weekend. Bye.
Fun.
All right. That was a lot of information. It was all so awesome though. And it's like stuff that most of that stuff I've never heard before though.
Yeah.
That's what's so crazy about it. Like I've never heard of the term, until I heard her talk, I've never heard of the term blueprint or structured water.
Yeah, that's what I meant. She's using, her terminology is so unique to her signature, which is cool because that's kind of what she speaks about. And even though it's concepts that we may have like brushed before, thought of before, they're out there, of course, they've been thought of, but she's put it into language that helps my brain understand it from another little facet.
And it gives you such strong visuals. The way she says it, you like, you get the visual, which is really cool. Yeah. So
what?
You want my magic trick or you want to go first?
I don't care. You know what? I'll go first because I know mine's very much in line with what, excuse me. I'll go first because mine's very much in line with what she was speaking on about water.
Okay.
Which I find freaking fascinating. So you've likely heard about Dr. Masaru Emoto's water experiment. This happened a long time ago now, but where he photographed water droplets under a microscope after exposing the water to different types of music, and also by taping words like love or hate to water bottles overnight, and then photographing how the water had changed. And in his study, he showed truly miraculous results where the water that was exposed to the word hate and with water that had been exposed to heavy metal music, they both had these like scattered, uneven, almost angry looking shapes under the microscope, whereas the water that he had labeled with the word love and the water that was exposed to a Mozart symphony both had symmetrical, unique patterns that looked much like a beautiful snowflake. And maybe most amazingly, he recorded the extreme difference that occurred when water was prayed over. So, and in his best-selling book, it's called The Hidden Messages in Water, he pointed to the fact that our human bodies are made up of around 65% water, which is also what Dr. McDougall spoke about today, as is the planet. The planet is covered, obviously, with much more water than it is land. So, to sum that up, he showed how the influence of our thoughts, words, and feelings can positively affect and impact the earth and our physical health. So my magic trick today is simple. It's to say thank you to the water you drink. That's it. If you really want, you can say, I love you. You can say, something positive to your water. And if this crazy old Japanese scientist is right, just doing that may start a positive ripple effect in your life, beginning at the cellular level with the way your body aligns with the water you drink.
I believe it.
I mean, after what we heard today on the show.
I don't pray over mine, but I will start. But I do write, I put a smiley face on the bottle, on the reusable Whole Foods thing. And then I put blessed water. But I will start praying over it. That's really a good idea. And saying thank you.
Yeah, I like that. What's your magic?
Mine is hugging a tree.
So as cliche as it sounds,
I know, but like you hear it and it sounds so hippie, like a tree hugger, but it really does have health benefits. So hugging a tree increases levels of the hormone oxytocin, and this hormone is responsible for feeling calm and emotional bonding. So you think about, like, even when you're not hugging a tree, when you're around nature, you're kind of, like you said, you're already feeling that. So imagine if you went up and hugged a tree. So when hugging a tree, the hormones serotonin and dopamine are also produced, which are, what makes us feel happy. And it is important to use this free space of a force we were given by nature to holistically heal ourselves. And I know, some people feel like they live in a concrete jungle like Hollywood or New York. But if we can find a way to get immersed in nature, there's so many health benefits. And there's also another thing that I read was that they release antimicrobial essential oils called phytoncides that protect trees from germs and have a host of health benefits for people. And we actually get that on us when we hug a tree. So that was really cool. And then lastly, according to Taoist masters, trees we know that they absorb carbon dioxide and change it into oxygen. That's why we need trees. But the Taoist belief is that they absorb negative energy from us when we're hugging it and send it back to us into a positive energy. So it's like recycling it for us the way that it does carbon dioxide into oxygen. So that's the Taoist belief. There were also there were also just there was also like a bunch of studies when I was researching this. There was a ton of studies about the effects it has on ADHD, anxiety, and depression. But they were even wanting to call ADHD, they were wanting to call it nature deficit disorder instead, because they
Wow.
were saying that most children who have ADHD do not spend time in nature. They're
I
on
bet.
screens, they're doing other things
Oh my God, I'm
that
calling it
is
that.
causing their ADHD. So it's really a nature deficit disorder, because if these children were instead outside spending time in nature, around trees, then it would actually get rid of those symptoms that,
Wow, I agree with that 100%. And I
yeah,
do think
I'd
that
never heard of that before.
I love nature deficit disorder. That I have that right now, actually. I think it's a global disorder right now is going
It
on
really
with the
is.
pandemic. I was going to say that I know that, of course, trees, which have been here far longer than humans, by the way, have to have this incredible wisdom that we can't even fathom or understand the language that it speaks. And I was reading something the other day, I don't remember where it came from, but it talked about how the root systems under the ground miles away can speak to other trees through the other
Yeah.
tree root systems under the ground, and
Mm-hmm.
basically communicate that there's a fungus on its way to you, or there's something negative, for instance, that's coming your way. And so that by the time that whatever this mold or whatever the thing is gets over to the trees that have been warned about it, they've produced, like what you're talking about, a certain oil or certain something
Mm-hmm.
that will protect them from that, which is
Yeah.
amazing. I mean, they've
Yeah, it's
created
really
an immune
cool.
system
And then there's
through
the
this network.
Cosmos episode about how we share DNA with a tree. That episode is really cool.
Yeah.
So I would recommend you go listen to that if you enjoyed this magic trick.
I love it. Go hug a tree, y'all.
Yeah. All right, Magic Mobbers. Thank you so much for tuning in and taking this journey with us. If this episode held some magic for you, please share it with your friends and family. This would mean the world to us. And don't forget to join us on our Instagram page at The Magic Hour and let us know what your favorite episodes have been so far. We appreciate all of your feedback and want to know what's lighting you up.
Yes, and we release a new episode every Monday, so you can catch us again next week or go listen to some of our past episodes in our podcast library now. Until then,
Be a light.